All right, let's jump right in and explore bride prices around the world. We're going to be looking at this YouTube documentary called In 8 Countries, You Can Buy Your Wife for $35 Travel Documentary. Okay, I know that title's kind of jarring, but
Yeah.
we'll definitely be talking about that whole buying thing. But just to be clear, we're not talking about like literally buying someone.
Yeah, it's more about these ancient traditions, like where money is part of marriage. And you really have to understand the history and the social stuff to really get it.
Right. It's like looking back in time to see how these customs have changed over time. And what's cool is this documentary takes us all over the globe. We're talking places like Egypt, Latvia, South Korea, Vietnam, Malaysia, China, Bulgaria, and India. It's a real cultural mix.
Absolutely. It's like a crash course in how different cultures see marriage and what it tells us about gender roles, the economy, and even how connected the world is becoming.
So, first stop, Egypt. This documentary focuses on foreign men seeking Egyptian brides. And it's kind of crazy how much emphasis they put on the financial benefits for the families,
Yeah.
especially the ones struggling financially. They even mention these temporary marriages, which honestly sounds risky for the women involved.
Yeah, it's definitely a sensitive topic, and you have to be careful. Historically, bride prices were meant to kind of compensate the bride's family, for losing her work and what she brought to the family. It was like recognizing how valuable she was. But when poverty is a big issue, the meaning can get twisted, and it becomes more about money than anything else.
Right, it's like the documentary is suggesting that.
Right.
In some situations, poverty might be pushing families to see their daughters
Yeah.
as a way to get ahead financially, even if it's just a short-term thing. I'm also really curious about the women. The documentary mentions them actually looking for Western husbands. What do you think is driving them to do that?
Well, it's often about wanting more freedom and opportunities. Western countries, even though they have problems, they tend to give women more independence, like in education, their careers, and even their relationships.
So it's not just about getting out of a tough money situation. It's about wanting a more equal relationship where they have a say and can control their own lives. It's like they're saying, hey, I deserve to be heard too.
Exactly. It's all about having control and living a life they want. And this idea of wanting control, you'll see it pops up in many of the cultures we'll be looking at.
Okay, next up is Latvia. And this one surprised me. The documentary says that Latvia has this unique situation. More women than men. That's a
Mhm.
pretty big difference between the genders. Do you think that's why Latvian women are looking for husbands from other countries?
Yeah, you can't ignore that. When you have way more women than men, it changes how marriage works. It's like supply and demand. Too many women can make things competitive and affect how traditions change. But that's not the only thing going on. The economy and concerns about women's rights are also part of it.
I see. So it's like a bunch of factors all mixed together. And the documentary does talk a lot about how beautiful and educated Latvian women are. It makes you wonder if those are the main reasons foreign men are attracted to them.
Yeah, looks can definitely be part of it. But let's not forget that strong marriages need more than that. Shared values, getting along, and a real connection. That's what makes a relationship work. And the documentary makes it clear that Latvian women are serious about finding a lifelong partner, someone who's in it for the long haul.
That makes sense. All right, on to South Korea. And this one really threw me off. The documentary claims that even parents in South Korea are encouraging their daughters to marry foreigners. What's going on there?
Well, it's connected to South Korea's really low birth rate. More and more women are deciding not to get married or have kids, or at least not in the traditional way. So now, Korean men, especially in the countryside, are having trouble finding wives. So they're looking to other Asian countries for brides.
Wow, it's like one change in society leads to another. And the documentary mentions this term, and honestly, it made me cringe. Leftover women. Can you tell us about that and the pressures women face in South Korea?
It's sad how cultural expectations and pressure from society can be so harmful. In some places, there's so much pressure for women to marry and have kids by a certain age. If they don't, they get labeled and left out. It's really unfair and shows how important it is to respect individual choices.
Yeah, it reminds us that everyone should be able to choose their own path, no matter what their culture is.
Absolutely. And challenging those labels and expectations is so important. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, whether they're married or not.
All right, get ready for a quick tour of the rest of the countries. What are some key things we see in Vietnam, Malaysia, China, Bulgaria, and India? Tell me everything.
Buckle up. It's a wild ride through different cultures. In Vietnam, family responsibility is huge for women, and they often prefer older, more settled husbands. Malaysia is this awesome mix of cultures with different views on Western influence, and money problems also play a role there.
Interesting. So it's like tradition, modern stuff, and a bit of economic reality all rolled into one.
Exactly. China is a whole different story. Their bride price thing has gotten even bigger because of the gender imbalance, all because of their one-child policy.
Whoa, that's heavy stuff. I can't wait to hear more about that. And what about Bulgaria? I'm curious about that gypsy bride market the documentary mentions.
Oh, yeah. The Gypsy Bride Market is a one-of-a-kind thing where old traditions meet modern bargaining. You get a glimpse of a world where marriage arrangements are made in a busy market.
That sounds like something out of a movie. I can
Yeah.
just imagine all the colors, the bartering, and the traditions all mixed together.
You're not far off. It's a cool mix of culture and business.
Okay, last but not least, India. What's the bride price situation like there?
In India, family is super important and arranged marriages are still common. A lot of foreign men are drawn to Indian culture and how much they value family, so they go there looking for brides.
So it's a mix of being fascinated by the culture and wanting a partner who values family and tradition. That's
Pretty-
pretty
I-
interesting.
It is, and that's just a tiny peek into how complex bride prices are in India. We could talk for hours about all the little details.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. It's amazing how different these customs are, even though they all have that money element in the marriage process.
Mm-hmm.
But it's way more complicated than just money, right?
You got it. These customs are a part of history, culture, and how society works. It's never as simple as saying one is right or wrong. We need to approach this carefully and try to understand all the reasons behind it.
Okay, let's take a breather here. I need to process all this amazing information. When we come back, we'll talk about what all this means for how we view marriage and gender roles and individual choices in the world today. So we've gone from Egypt to South Korea and seen all these different ways bride prices work. And it's clear that it's not just about the money. There's a lot more to it. Like, what do bride prices tell us about how women are valued in these places?
It really makes you think, doesn't it? In some cases, it could be seen as recognizing a woman's worth, and all the things she does for her family. But like we talked about, when poverty is a big factor, it can change the whole meaning. It starts to feel like a business deal instead of celebrating the woman.
Right, it becomes less about her and more about what she's worth financially. Which reminds me of something else that stood out in the documentary. A lot of these women are actually choosing to find foreign husbands. They're not just sitting back and letting things happen.
You're absolutely right. They're taking control of their lives. They want better opportunities, relationships where they're equals, and the chance to create their own future. It's really inspiring to see.
Yeah, it definitely changes the idea that women are just going along with these traditions.
Yeah.
It also made me think about all the pressure on women in some cultures, like South Korea, to get married and have kids. Makes you wonder how globalization is affecting these traditional expectations worldwide.
It's like shaking things up.
Uh-huh.
Globalization has made change happen faster. And we're seeing these clashes between old traditions and modern goals. As women get more education and job opportunities, they don't want to settle. They want more for themselves, and they should.
So it's like these bride price customs are being shaped by these bigger global forces that are changing the world.
Exactly. A culture's not fixed, it's always changing. And the question is, how can we make sure this change leads to more equality and respect for everyone?
That's the big question, for sure. What about the men in all this? What did you notice about how the documentary showed them?
Well, the documentary did a pretty good job of showing that men who are looking for foreign brides have different reasons for doing it. Some are looking for those traditional values. Others want a partner who gets their situation. And some are just drawn to different cultures. Just like the women, these men are individuals with their own stories and reasons.
Right. It's good to remember that we can't just put everyone in the same box. There are so many individual stories and factors involved. And of course, we can't ignore the ethical questions that come up with bride prices.
You're right. You got to be careful about power imbalances and exploitation. It's really important to make sure any money stuff is clear, that both people are truly agreeing to it, and that women are never treated like objects.
The documentary did show some situations where women were basically abandoned once the man got what he wanted from the marriage, especially when the man was mainly looking for companionship or a cultural experience.
Those situations are really sad, and they show us why it's so important. To approach relationships with people from other cultures with respect and understanding, and a real desire for a lasting connection. Love and marriage shouldn't be a temporary thing.
It also makes you think about the role of those matchmaking services, the ones that connect people from different countries. How much responsibility do they have to make sure that people they're matching are safe and happy?
That's a big debate right now. Some people say these services are just helping people connect. But others say there needs to be more honesty and rules to stop people from getting hurt.
Right, there's a fine line between helping people find love and making money off of their desire for connection.
And we can't forget about the huge impact of the internet and social media. They've completely changed how these connections happen across cultures.
It's a totally different world compared to how these traditions worked even a generation ago. Technology has really changed everything.
It really has. And with all these changes come new challenges, like how to navigate cultural differences, respect people's choices, and make sure everyone has a chance to find love and happiness in their own way.
I think we've done a pretty good job of understanding all the complexities here, but I'm sure our listeners still have questions.
I bet they do. And that's great. It means they're interested, curious, and really thinking about this, which is what we want with these deep dives.
So now that we've covered the basics, where do we go from here? We've talked about the history, the cultural stuff, the economics, and the ethical concerns. What does it all mean in the bigger picture?
What's really interesting is that we're seeing this global conversation about what marriage really is and its role in the 21st century. It's like we're at a turning point, redefining marriage in a world that's changing so fast.
You mean how it's going beyond those traditional roles and expectations?
Exactly. We're seeing women all over challenging old systems, demanding more control and changing what it means to be a wife and a partner. And men are trying to figure things out too, like their own identities and what they want as these global trends keep happening.
It's like the whole idea of partnership is being renegotiated all over the world. And these bride price practices, with all their complexities, are right in the middle of it.
They make us ask some tough questions, like what's a fair exchange in a relationship? How do we balance what individuals want with traditions that have been around forever? And how do we make sure love and respect are the foundation of any marriage, no matter what culture or financial situation people are in?
It makes me realize how much of what we think is normal. It's really just because of the culture we grew up in.
That's a really important realization, and it's key to understanding these global trends. We all see the world based on our own experiences, and that's why it's so important to see things from different perspectives, to challenge what we assume, and to talk about these things with empathy and humility.
And the documentary doesn't shy away from the negative side of these practices either, like the potential for exploitation and cases where women are left stranded and hurt.
Those stories remind us that we can't just romanticize these traditions. We need to be careful to protect people who are vulnerable and make sure everyone's rights and well-being are respected.
Wow, feels like we've only scratched the surface here. There's so much more to learn about all these traditions and beliefs.
Oh, definitely. There's always something new to discover. That's what makes this stuff so interesting. This deep dive is just the beginning for you guys. I encourage you to keep exploring, look for different opinions, and keep asking those thought-provoking questions.
I know I'm leaving with a whole new way of thinking about love and marriage and how those ideas are different around the world. What's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all this?
I think the most important thing is that to understand other cultures, you have to get out of your comfort zone. It's about listening without judging and realizing that we're all human and connected in some way. There's so much richness and complexity in how people live, and that's something to appreciate.
I love that. And to leave you with something to think about, I have one last question.
Well,
As we see these changes in marriage and partnerships happening everywhere, what does it say about how ideas about gender roles and individual choice are changing in the 21st century? It's something to consider as you keep exploring this fascinating topic. Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive into bride prices around the world.